Welcome back to Green is Good. We're so honored to have today Scott Sargent. He's the director of Houlihan Lokey's Industrials Group. He's also a friend of mine. Welcome to Green is Good, Scott Sargent.
Thanks a lot, John. I really appreciate you having me on the show today. Love to tell my story about the world that I've dedicated, which is investment banking in the environmental services space.
Well, that's great because, we haven't covered that space as much. But before we even get into investment banking and environment, can you share a little bit about the Scott Sargent story and how the journey leading up here? How do you even get to this position and how you end up at Houlihan Lokey in this unique and leadership position?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to talk about that. So, basically, I've been with Houlihan Lokey for about 12 years now. Houlihan Lokey is an international investment bank that is a full service in terms of advisory services. We provide mergers and acquisitions, capital markets, financial restructuring, and valuation services to our clients around the world. We've got a net 900 employees, and we cover a whole variety of different industries in those services. Over the years, I was just an investment banker, spending all my time executing transactions, M&A, and raising capital for our middle market clients. And a few years ago, basically my personal and professional lives collided. And what I mean by that is that all of a sudden, when I decided to really spend my time in a particular area, I wanted to focus my banking career on something that truly mattered to me, and for something that I had a passion for. I've always loved the outdoors. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, watching all the regulation through the 80s to really clean up the waterways, and was always exposed to that. And that was something I had a passion for. And then now that I have children, and hopefully grandchildren one day, I'm care increasingly so about the environment that they're growing up in.
Interesting.
And so, as an investment banker, I was fortunate enough to get exposed to a variety of very cool companies that provide services that really address some of these environmental problems. Companies that recycle soil for beneficial reuse, collect and recycle used motor oil, the oil that comes out of your car when you have to do an oil change. Companies that have gone out and had big roles in terms of cleaning up the BP oil spill, things like that. Companies that are really making a difference. And so I was fortunate enough to work with companies like that. And as I said, my personal passions kind of collided with that experience. And a few years ago, decided to spend my entire career in banking just focused on working with companies like that, because I personally, as a finance guy, am not personally changing the world the way these companies are, but I get to be exposed to these companies on a regular basis and help them raise the capital or look for owners for their businesses to really help them do what they want to accomplish.
That's awesome. So you are then the director in charge of the Environmental and Industrial Services Group. So you mentioned some of those different subsectors, Scott. Talk a little bit about environmental services. What does that really mean for our listeners out there in terms of the categories that you cover and the businesses that you cover?
Sure, yeah. So the way I define environmental services, first of all, it's a huge market. Depending upon how you define it, in the U.S. alone, it's a $200 billion a year kind of business, and it's very fragmented. So it covers a lot of different kinds of companies.
Right.
But the services that the companies that I work with, what they do is they really help other companies focus on sustainability, safety, just keeping them environmentally compliant, energy efficiency. These are the themes that these companies are, helping, regular industrial, commercial, consumer product companies, focus on. Another way to define it is that if you just think of any waste stream, if it's the garbage that you put out at the curb, your recyclables, the contaminated soils, wastewater, air pollution, whatever it is, these are all different forms of waste streams. that are produced by our society, there are so many services that touch those waste streams as they move from upstream where they're generated to downstream where they ultimately have to be eliminated or put into some sort of final resting place,
right,
if you will. And those, so on the upstream, those waste products have to be tested, engineered, or analyzed.
Sure.
So these are kind of professional services. Downstream, those waste products are recycled, treated, incinerated, or ultimately landfilled. Less so. We can touch on that a little bit. But and then in between, there at various points, all these waste streams are being touched in many different ways. They're being cleaned, remediated, collected, transported, and stored. And frankly, now there's a big trend that a lot of these waste streams are finding their way into a closed-loop system. So there is no final resting place, right? You're continuously recycling the same product over and over again for continued use, whether it's plastics or metals or something as unique as used motor oil. We've done some transactions in that particular sector.
If you just joined us now, we're with Scott Sargent. He's the director of Houlihan Lokey's Industrials Group. If you want to follow along like I am right now, I'm on my iPad while I'm visiting with Scott here, and I'm on his great website. It's www.hl.com, www.hl.com. Scott, talk a little bit about what you've seen now. You've been at Houlihan Lokey for 12 years. You're in the middle of a very interesting and important segment of the business. The investment banking world. Is there a lot of interest in investing in the environmental services sector right now?
Yeah, short answer, John, is absolutely. There is a lot of corporate M&A activity. So there are large businesses that are acquiring smaller businesses and even large companies. Private equity is an enormous pool of capital that needs to be put to work over the near term. These are institutions that have to spend billions of dollars in private enterprises, and they are increasingly trying to build investment theses around this particular sector and just put their money to work. Again, there's just billions of dollars in that pool of capital alone. Venture capital has always been interested in the sector in a variety of different areas like clean tech and just some other emerging or fast-growing opportunities. And I spend a lot of time visiting with both large companies and private equity funds alike, helping them think about places where they can build businesses, where to expand, where there's consolidation opportunities. And aside from doing and executing transactions for our clients, that's where I spend a lot of time, helping people think about where to build their businesses in this particular sector. But a lot of activity. We closed 4 transactions. We advised on 4 different transactions in the month of August alone, which we don't do on an annual on a monthly basis. But certainly, I think is an indication of the activity in the sector. We represented a company called Terra Renewal, which is a non-hazardous liquid waste business. And we sold. Our client sold their business to Darling International, which is a large, publicly traded, food rendering and food service recycling, waste recycling company. We helped restructure and sell a company called Synagro Technologies,
right,
which helps recycle the solids that are separated from wastewater treatment plants.
Right.
And that business was sold to a European infrastructure fund called EQT, which was a very interesting transaction. We also, in the month of August, sold a waste-to-energy facility down in South New Jersey to Covanta Energy, which is the largest waste-to-energy business in the United States. And then we helped a company called Santec Waste, which is a municipal solid waste landfill company, recapitalize their business. So all kind of touches on a variety of different areas within.
Right.
If you go back to the definition of environmental services, John touches on a bunch of those different pockets.
And, so really, as opposed to how the media portrays the investment banking world today, you're an investment banker who's actually doing good. You're doing well for, of course, your firm and for yourself, which is part of the wonderful capitalistic world and society that we live in, especially here in our democracy in the United States. But you're also doing well by getting the right support, as you so say, in terms of raising capital or creating alliances and collaborations for the brands that you represent so they could do more of the important and great work that they do that helps sustain our great environment in the world that we live in.
You said it very well, John. That's what gets me really excited about going to work every day because I get to work with companies, that truly are making a difference and bringing value to them in the form of capital and helping them partner with the right groups to help them grow and become stronger businesses.
Let's talk a little bit about trends. What are some of the hot trends that you see right now? What's hot and what's not with regards to environmental services that you're seeing? Because you've got great visibility on this.
So there are a bunch of different trends. I think make it a very interesting place for people to put money in. There are a couple of themes that everyone talks about and hears about. I think worth mentioning sustainability and landfill avoidance. Those are two good examples, and they're big terms and big words that people maybe even overuse a little bit, but they are not trends anymore. They're very real, and just talk about sustainability for a second. I mean, most, if not all, Fortune 500 companies today have just massive sustainability initiatives. And now even have a chief sustainability officer working in their C-suite, right? And look, it's good PR, it's good for brand imaging, but they're also proving to be, economical and cost-saving initiatives. Yeah. Landfill avoidance, you see it everywhere right now. You have so many alternative outlets to put your waste. It was just taking the traditional glass, paper, and aluminum out of your trash can, and now you've got avenues to take your food and compost. John, you're helping facilitate this huge universe of electronic waste, and there's a whole variety of other specialty waste streams where there are ways to dispose of it, not put it in a landfill. And that leads into another theme that I really like, which is just creating value from waste streams. Huh. So there are some of the large integrated waste companies. Yep. Like Waste Management Public, they don't call waste. They call it, alternative materials, right? Because they know that they're controlling this valuable product. Really, I mean, I even heard one CEO or one executive, in my passing, say that everything can be recycled except asbestos. Right. There's, if you think about it, there's maybe a cost to recycling certain things more than others, but at the end of the day, you can find an outlet for almost anything out there.
That's so interesting. For our listeners out there that are investing, even just picking stocks and things of that such, what are some of the bigger pitfalls for investors that you would highlight or you'd like to highlight for people to be careful of while they're looking at their opportunities out there in terms of placing their own capital?
Sure. So, a couple of things. Well, growth is always, probably one of the biggest growth driver. Yeah. In certain instances, in every instance, right? I mean, that ultimately drives, whether you put a big multiple or a small multiple on a business. And I think, the one thing that you would want to be careful about is truly what kind of tailwinds the business has to grow it. Right, and we just talked about landfill avoidance initiatives. There is in some areas that the waste streams that are being generated are being are just not the fastest growing markets. Right, I mean in conjunction with landfill avoidance, there's just an overall focus on reducing or minimizing the use of certain waste streams of raw materials used to manufacture. So you want to just want to focus on truly what is driving the business, the growth of the business. One other thing that we come across sometimes is the exposure to commodity prices. So a lot of the value that we just talked about comes out of these waste streams are commodities like it could be tied to oil prices or metals or some other commodities. So you just want to understand sort of how that, what the exposure is that the company has to those that are really sort of outside the control of the service that you're providing. So the companies that really differentiate themselves are ones that are creating an essential service where you're getting paid to provide something that is essential to the ongoing business to survive.
Got it. And in terms of you cover, you're in New York City and you travel a lot and things of that such. What do you see in terms of cross-border activity in the environmental services sector?
Yeah, that's a good question. We see across the industrial world that I'm a member of at Houlihan, where we're the most active industrial advisor in terms of M&A. We see just a tremendous amount of cross-border activity, and we've transacted a large percentage of our deals with Asian and European, even now South American businesses buying U.S.-based companies. Specifically within environmental services, surprisingly, we're starting to see a lot more of that. And what I think is interesting, if you kind of pick the world apart, there are different countries and continents are at various stages of evolution in terms of progression towards focused on environmental issues. Europe, for instance, is in many respects way ahead of where the United States is.
Right.
And so Europeans kind of view the U.S. as almost an emerging market in some ways. So
that's interesting.
Now, putting aside the issues that a lot of European countries are having right now, I think you'll see an increased focus as they come out of the recession and looking at investing dollars in the U.S. On the flip side, if you look at countries in Asia and South America, like China and Brazil, they are way behind the U.S. And now they are actually looking at U.S. businesses, services, technology companies, so that they can adopt the best practices that we have here. Maybe make an investment, bring home some of those technologies, or learn best practices by owning businesses here, and then bringing it back to their home country to deal with these big problems that they have.
That's so interesting. How about pending regulation? Is regulation driving? Is that one of the major forces of velocity supporting the companies and pushing the companies forward that you are invested in, or you are finding investors for?
Regulation is a big trend that we're always focused on for all the businesses that we deal with. Regulation is a very good thing for the businesses that operate in this sector because it protects them. It's a real driver for why these companies exist and why they need to exist.
Right.
And you have the comfort that regulation is continuously increasing, and it's really it's kind of an irreversible trend. If you just look, over the decades since the 60s when all the regulations started, you can just kind of pile on decade over decade more and more regulation, which are good for all these companies. That said, you wouldn't. You want to be careful not to rely on regulation because often it's very hard to predict when the EPA or federal or state agencies are going to really enforce new regulation. You know that it will happen. It's a matter of when. So you want to be careful not to truly bet on certain new regulation, but you can rely on the fact that it's only going to get stricter, right, over time.
Right.
And what exists today is not going away.
Right.
And there are, a number of big themes out there that I think could be big, really game-changing for a number of industries.
That's interesting.
E-waste, for, as you know, John, that's, one area when that becomes, it's just a matter of when that becomes a national, more federally regulated industry.
Right.
Fracking, all the fracking rules that deal with the wastewater around the oil and gas sector. That's
right.
a huge area. Where regulation varies state to state in terms of what you can do with that wastewater, and there's other I think pending regulation around air pollution, wastewater, other waste products like coal ash. What to do with all that. Whether that can go into traditional landfills or specialty landfills. So there's a lot of things that the EPA is working on, and there will be definitely some big regulation in the near future.
Scott, we're down to the last minute and a half or so, but you get an interesting visibility into so many great companies in this country because of where you sit at Houlihan Lokey, and some are in your sector, in industrial or environmental services, and some are not. They're just other companies. Do you see, given your unique spot that you sit, green and sustainability as a competitive advantage for the companies that you represent in environmental services and industrials?
Across the board, if you provide a sustainable solution or a green solution, I think all else being equal, it is a competitive advantage. And what I mean by that is, so long as that if it's not a more expensive, or if you're not providing a more expensive or more or significantly more expensive service, all else being equal, consumers or industrial businesses will choose the more sustainable green option. So yes, it does become a big competitive advantage for these businesses.
Hey, for our listeners out there in the last couple seconds here that want to be the next Scott Sargent, we got a lot of young listeners across the United States and across the world that want to grow up and one day change the world like you get to change the world. Any last pearls of wisdom for them as they embark on college and grad school? Sure.
I think there are just so many emerging opportunities out there. We work with a lot of mature businesses, but we work with a lot of emerging businesses, and there are so many really interesting companies that are continuously being developed and new business models out there. So, I guess for the younger listeners, I would just look for some of these opportunities, because I think those companies will become bigger and bigger and more relevant over time.
Scott Sargent, thank you so much. For those who want to learn more about Scott and what Houlihan Lokey is doing, it's www.houlihanlokeyhl.com, www.hl.com. Scott Sargent, you're a great sustainability leader, a good friend, and truly living proof that green is good.